The village of Echo, nestled between lush hills and a winding river, was a place where the spirits whispered in the wind, and the ancestors watched over the land. Each tree, each stone, and every ripple in the water held meaning, as the people of Echo lived by the wisdom passed down from their elders. They believed that every action had a purpose, every word spoken was heard by the spirits, and every moment in life was a part of the great circle of existence. Here, the balance of life was upheld by the traditions that the villagers held dear, traditions that had been passed down through the generations like the steady flow of the river. The villagers, from the youngest child to the oldest elder, lived in harmony with nature and with each other, guided by the teachings of the ancestors and the spirits who watched over them. The sun had just begun to rise over the hills of Echo when the news spread through the village like wildfire. Chief Okafor's wife had given birth to a daughter. The whole village gathered to celebrate the arrival of the child, for it was not just any child. This was a child destined for greatness. Okafor, a man of wisdom and strength, had led his people through many seasons of hardship and joy, and now his pride was not only in his leadership, but in his beloved daughter, Amara. As the newborn's cries echoed through the village, the elders gathered, offering their blessings to the child. "She is a gift from the spirits," they declared. "Her beauty will shine like the first light of dawn, and her wisdom will surpass that of even the greatest leaders." From that moment, it was clear that Amara was no ordinary child. As she grew, the villagers marveled at her beauty and the grace with which she carried herself. Her eyes sparkled with the knowledge of the ancients, and her words carried the weight of wisdom that seemed far beyond her years. Mara blossomed into a young woman, and with each passing day, her light grew brighter. The villagers adored her. Mothers spoke of her to their children as the perfect example of what a woman should be: kind, strong, and wise. Fathers whispered to each other, saying that Amara's wisdom was like the deep roots of the great baobab tree, unshakable, unyielding, and timeless. Even the elders, who had seen many seasons come and go, looked to Amara for guidance. She helped her father, Chief Okafor, with matters of the village, offering counsel to those who came seeking wisdom. Her words were like honey, sweet and full of understanding. The people of Echo believed that Amara was the future of their village, and she embodied all the virtues they held dear. Her beauty was said to rival that of the moon itself, and her wisdom was as vast as the river that flowed through the village. The people saw in her not only a leader, but a symbol of Echo's prosperity. The village had never been more united, and they believed that as long as Amara walked among them, their land would remain blessed. But as Amara's perfection grew, so did the envy of those who felt overshadowed by her light. In the quiet corners of the village behind closed doors, whispers began to stir. "Is it possible for one so young to be without flaw?" some murmured. "Does she not have a shadow, a weakness?" Others questioned whether Amara's beauty and wisdom were truly hers, or if they were the result of something deeper, something hidden beneath the surface. The villagers, though they loved Amara, began to wonder if she was too perfect. The elders spoke of how, in the old days, greatness was earned through struggle, through hardship. "She has lived a life untouched by the pains of the world," one elder said. "But true greatness comes only when one has known suffering. How can she understand the struggles of the people if she has never known hardship?" The seeds of doubt were planted, and though most of the villagers still adored Amara, there was a growing unease, a question that lingered in the air like the scent of a storm on the horizon. Chief Okafor, aware of the whispers that had begun to swirl around his daughter, knew it was time to act. He called for a grand celebration, one that would silence any doubts and remind the people of Echo of Amara's worth. This would be no ordinary festival. It would mark her transition into womanhood, her acceptance as the true heir of Echo. The entire village and even those from neighboring lands were invited to witness the greatness of Amara. The day of the celebration arrived, and the air was thick with anticipation. The village square was adorned with colorful fabrics, and the sounds of drumming echoed through the hills. Amara stood before the crowd, her beauty and grace a shining beacon. Suitors from far and wide presented themselves to the chief, each hoping to win Amara's favor and secure her hand in marriage. But the villagers, though excited, could not help but sense the rivalry that stirred beneath the surface. There was more than one reason for this celebration, and the villagers knew it. It was a test. A test of Amara's place in the village, a test of whether her perfection was truly her own. As the celebration reached its height, the whispers grew darker. The suitors, though eager to win Amara's heart, were not the only ones asking questions. Some of the older villagers, those who had seen many seasons pass, began to speak in hushed tones. Why was Amara found by the river as a baby? One asked. No one remembers her mother. The spirits have never spoken of her true parentage. Another said, her voice barely above a whisper. The older villagers began to piece together memories that didn't quite fit. They remembered how, many years ago, a child had been found by the river, abandoned but alive. It was said that the spirits had brought her to Echo. Some even began to suggest that Amara was not born of Okafor's bloodline, but was instead a gift from the spirits, a mysterious child with a purpose that no one could foresee. The villagers were torn. Some denied the rumors, clinging to the belief that Amara was truly their own. But others, their hearts heavy with doubt, began to question everything they had believed about the young woman they had adored for so long. The once unified village was now divided, its faith shaken by the growing uncertainty. Amara, though she tried to remain composed, felt the weight of the rumors pressing on her heart. The perfect life she had known was now crumbling around her. She began to question her place in the world. Was she truly the daughter of Chief Okafor? Or had she been placed in this role by forces beyond her control? The whispers, though subtle, had reached her ears, and they had planted a seed of doubt in her heart. In the quiet moments when the drumming stopped and the villagers slept, Amara would sit by the river, staring into its depths as if searching for the answers that eluded her. Was she merely a symbol of the village's prosperity? Or was she something more? A person with a destiny of her own. Her heart ached as she grappled with the truth of her origins, torn between the love she had for the chief and the haunting mystery of her true identity. As the night grew darker, Amara knew that her journey was far from over. The path ahead was uncertain, and the truth, no matter how painful, would eventually find its way to the surface. She only hoped that when it did, she would have the strength to face it. This script delves deeply into the internal and external conflicts surrounding Amara's identity, the shifting dynamics in the village, and the growing tension between tradition and doubt. The narrative follows the style of AfricanTales, with vivid imagery, rich cultural context, and the slow unraveling of a once perfect world. The village of Iko was a place where peace seemed eternal, where each day passed with the rhythm of the river and the whisper of the wind in the tall grasses. Yet one evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the earth, a figure appeared at the edge of the village. His worn clothes fluttered in the breeze, his face a map of journeys long taken. He walked with a quiet certainty, as though he belonged here. Yet something about him unsettled the air itself. His eyes were sharp, carrying with them a deep, knowing gaze, one that seemed to see beyond the surface into the very heart of things. The villagers gathered in small clusters, their eyes following him. Murmurs spread like fire on dry grass. Who was this man? From where did he come? His presence, so unlike the peace they had known, brought an unfamiliar tension. He stopped at the center of the village, his voice low but firm as he addressed the crowd. "I know the truth of Amara," he said, his words cutting through the hushed whispers. "The perfect daughter of Chief Okafor, the one you revere as the hope of this land. Her origins are not what you believe." The villagers gasped, uncertainty spreading through their hearts like a cold wind. "What do you mean?" one old woman asked, her voice shaking. "Amara is the chief's daughter, raised with love. Her beauty and wisdom are gifts from the ancestors." The stranger's lips curled into a knowing smile, dark eyes gleaming with secrets. "Yes," he said slowly, "but not all gifts are freely given. Some come with hidden truths, ones that the spirits have kept from you. Her perfection, it's an illusion. The village has been blinded by what you want to see, not what is." A young man stepped forward, his face filled with anger. "You speak of things you know nothing about. Amara is the light of Ikau. How dare you speak such lies?" The stranger's gaze hardened. "I speak not of lies, but of truths long buried. Truths that could unravel the very foundation of this village." The tension in the air was thick, and as the stranger's words echoed in the villagers' minds, doubt began to take root. Could it be true? Had they been blinded by Amara's perfection, or was there something darker hidden beneath her beauty and wisdom? Days passed, but the shadow of the stranger's words lingered in the village, like the river that wound its way through. Echo, the whispers flowed silently between villagers, leaving behind a trail of uncertainty. The elderly women, once so proud to speak of Amara as the village's shining star, now gathered in hushed circles, their eyes filled with doubt. One of them, Aunt Amma, whose hands had woven the finest cloth in the village, whispered to a younger woman, "I have watched her grow. Amara is a daughter of the spirits, a blessing. But are we too quick to see only her beauty, her wisdom? Could there be something we've missed?" Another elder, her face wrinkled like the bark of an old tree, nodded in agreement. "We have been told to believe she was sent by the river spirits. But if the stranger speaks truth, how are we to know who she really is? The spirits do not work in such mysterious ways without a reason." The more they whispered, the louder the doubts grew. In every corner of the village, people began to question. Had they been deceived? Was Amara truly the child of Chief Okafor, or was she something else, something unknown? Chief Okafor was not blind to the stirrings of doubt. When word reached him of the stranger's arrival and the rumors that had begun to spread like wildfire, a burning anger surged within him. He gathered the elders and called the villagers together, his face stern and full of authority. "Enough!" he bellowed, his voice echoing across the gathering. "I will not allow a stranger, a wandering madman, to turn our hearts against my daughter. Amara's blood is pure, just as the river that flows through Ikau. The spirits themselves blessed her, and no one will cast shadows on that truth." The villagers stood in silence, their hearts heavy with the weight of his words. Some nodded, comforted by the chief's certainty, while others, their faces clouded with doubt, whispered among themselves. Even as Okafor's words rang through the air, the seed of suspicion had already been planted. His vehement defense of Amara only made the whispers grow louder. One elder, his hands shaking as he stroked his beard, leaned close to a fellow elder and murmured, "The chief protests too much. Could there be a truth hidden even from him? Or is this love blinding him as it has blinded us?" Okafor, feeling the weight of their eyes upon him, tried to suppress the gnawing fear in his heart. His love for Amara was boundless, but he could not ignore the feeling that the earth itself trembled beneath his feet. The seer, an elder revered by all, stepped forward in the center of the gathering. Her eyes, clouded by age but still sharp, with the wisdom of the ancestors, gleamed with a knowing light. "I have seen it," she declared, her voice low but filled with power. "The spirits have spoken, and they have revealed the truth about Amara's past." The crowd went silent, hanging on her every word. "The child was not born of the chief's blood," the seer continued, her gaze unwavering. "She was found by the river, abandoned by a woman whose face none can remember. The spirits carried her to the river's edge, and there, Chief Okafor found her, believing her to be a gift from the gods. A murmur swept through the crowd. The truth, dark and unexpected, sank deep into their hearts. The child, though a blessing, comes with a price, the seer warned. What is given freely by the spirits may one day be taken back, and Echo may not be prepared for that price. The chief's face turned pale, his heart aching with the weight of the revelation. He had raised Amara with love and pride, but now, as the truth washed over him, a flood of doubt and fear began to break through his once unshakable confidence. Amara stood at the edge of the village, gazing at the river that had always been her lifeline. She had heard the seer's words, felt them cut through her heart like a blade. She had always known she was different, but she had never imagined the truth could be so painful. Raised as the daughter of Okafor, loved and admired by all, she had always believed she was perfect, a symbol of the village's prosperity. But now, the foundation of her identity crumbled. She was no longer the flawless daughter of Iko. She was an abandoned child, a mystery with no past. Her heart twisted with confusion. Who was she now? Was she still the hope of Iko, or had the very village that had adored her now turned its back on her? As Amara stood by the river, a single tear fell from her eye, carried away by the current. She had never asked for this truth, but now she was forced to face it. She was no longer just the chief's daughter. She was a stranger to herself. The village, once united in its admiration for Amara, now stood divided. The expectations of her, the love they had given her, were no longer enough. Her perfection had become a curse, and the villagers began to look at her with suspicion. Was she truly the divine gift they had believed her to be? Or was she just another story spun by the spirits? A story that could now be undone? Amara's heart ached as she realized the weight of what the village had expected of her. To them, she had never been allowed to be anything other than perfect. And now, as they turned away from her, she wondered if she had ever truly belonged. The truth had shattered the image of perfection she had worn, and the village that had once adored her now looked at her with eyes filled with doubt. In that moment, Amara understood that she was not just struggling with her identity. She was struggling with the very nature of what it meant to be loved. The sun had set over Ikau, casting long shadows across the village. Chief Okafor sat alone, staring into the flickering fire, his heart heavy with the weight of the truth that now threatened everything he had known. He had raised Amara as his own, loved her as his daughter, but now the villagers spoke of her origins in hushed tones, and his leadership was being questioned. His mind swirled with confusion, guilt, and fear. He knew his people trusted him, but could they still trust him now that the truth had surfaced? She was a gift from the spirits, he whispered to himself, but the words felt hollow. The words the stranger had spoken echoed in his mind, making him question everything. What if the spirits never meant for her to be mine? The chief closed his eyes, his fingers trembling as he gripped the worn leather of his cloak. His love for Amara, his belief in her perfection, was now tainted by the possibility that she was not truly his. Was she really a child of the river, odd, abandoned by the spirits? The thought tore at his heart. He had watched her grow, had seen her become everything Iko had hoped for, a beacon of beauty, wisdom, and grace. Yet now, in the face of truth, could he continue to protect her? Could he protect the village? His heart sank as he thought of the people, their trust in him slipping away. They had followed him for years, relying on his strength and leadership. But now, with doubt swirling like a storm cloud over the village, he feared they would no longer see him as their guide. Was he truly a leader, or was he just a man who had failed them? As Chief Okafor sat lost in thought, the voice of the village elder, Ife, echoed in his memory. Ife had warned him of the dangers of pride, of holding on to a truth that was not his, to possess. Sometimes the spirits have their own plans for us, the elder had said, and now those words seemed to ring louder than ever before. the chief's inner turmoil deepened. If the village turned against him, would they be able to survive the division? Could the bonds of family and community survive the weight of such a revelation? He shook his head, as though trying to shake the thought away. "Amara," he whispered, "what have I done?" The next morning, the village gathered in the clearing as the sun rose, casting a golden glow over their faces. Chief Okafor stood at the center, his heart heavy as he faced his people. The murmur of voices filled the air, and all eyes turned toward him. The weight of their gaze was like 1,000 stones pressing on his chest. The chief stood tall, but inside he felt small and vulnerable. "My people," he began, his voice steady, but a hint of fear lingered beneath the surface. "I stand before you today, not as a man who has all the answers, but as one who seeks your understanding." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "There are whispers in the wind, voices that call into question the truth of my daughter, Amara. I know that her origins may seem strange, and I know the winds of doubt have begun to stir among you. But I say to you now, the love that I have for Amara is not born of blood, but of spirit, and it is pure." The villagers murmured, some in agreement, others in doubt. "The spirit world has given her to me," Chief Okafor continued. "It is not for you to question the will of the spirits. She is my daughter, and that truth cannot be changed. I will not let the whispers of strangers undo what has been. We must remain strong, united, as we have always been." But his words, though strong, did not have the power they once did. In the crowd, some of the elders exchanged uncertain glances, and the younger villagers whispered among themselves. The seeds of doubt had been planted, and they had begun to take root. In the coming days, the murmur of doubt grew louder, and, with it, the sense of unrest. The chief's words, once so solid and true, now seemed fragile and uncertain. More and more villagers began to question his leadership, his judgment, and his love for Amara. The trust that had bound the village together began to unravel, and the weight of the chief's dilemma grew heavier with each passing hour. Amara, too, felt the tension. She had once been the pride of the village, the daughter of the great Chief Okafor. But now she could feel the eyes of the villagers on her, their gazes filled with suspicion. She had always known she was different. She had always known that. The chief was not her true father, but she had never thought it would come to this. She had always been loved, always been accepted, but now her identity was under scrutiny, and she was unsure where she stood. And there was one who had been waiting for this moment, the suitor who had once admired Amara, who had once dreamt of marrying her. But now, seeing the doubt growing in the village, his heart burned with jealousy. He saw an opportunity, an opening to gain power in the village. He began to spread rumors, whispering that Amar was no mere child of the river, but a spirit, cursed, to bring destruction to Ekau. "She will destroy us," he whispered to anyone who would listen. "Her beauty is an illusion, and her wisdom is a lie. The spirits never intended for her to be the daughter of Chief Okafor. She will bring ruin to us all." The lies spread like wildfire, poisoning the minds of the villagers. Fear and doubt crept into the hearts of the people, and soon, the once vibrant village of Ekau began to turn cold. Amara, once adored, was now feared. Chief Okafor, desperate to restore peace, called for the elders to perform a sacred ritual, one that had not been conducted in many generations. The ritual, he hoped, would clear the air, revealing the truth about Amara's origins and restoring balance to the village. It was a test of faith, a plea for the spirits to reveal their will. As the elders prepared for the ritual, Amara stood in the center of the village, her heart heavy with uncertainty. The people gathered around her, their eyes filled with judgment and curiosity. The ritual would determine her fate, and she had no choice but to submit to it. The elders began to chant, their voices rising in a haunting melody that seemed to pull at the very air around them. "Amara," the chief said, his voice filled with sorrow. "This is the moment that will decide your future and that of our village. What will you choose?" Tears welled up in Amara's eyes as she stood before the elders, the weight of the moment pressing on her shoulders. She could feel the gaze of every villager upon her, their judgment weighing heavy in her heart. With a trembling voice, Amara spoke, "I am not the daughter of Chief Okafor. I was found by the river, abandoned by my mother, but I have always been loved, and I have always been part of this village." Her words cut through the silence like a sharp blade, and for a moment, the entire village seemed to hold its breath. As she spoke, the air around them seemed to shift. The spirits, moved by her honesty and bravery, began to stir, their presence felt in the breeze that swept through the trees. The villagers, once divided, began to see her not as a threat but as a true daughter of the land. Chief Okafor, though heartbroken, felt a wave of relief wash over him. The truth had been revealed, and with it, the chance for healing. The village, though scarred, began to rebuild, and Amara's courage became the foundation upon which a new unity was forged. The spirits, satisfied with Amara's sacrifice, blessed the village once more, and Echo, though forever changed, stood stronger for it. The truth had been spoken, and in its wake, a community reborn. The village was still, the air thick with anticipation, as the spirits, moved by Amara's bravery and her willingness to offer herself as a sacrifice, intervened. It was a rare thing, the spirits coming so directly, but on this day, their presence was undeniable. The earth trembled beneath the feet of the villagers, and the sky above, which had once seemed angry and oppressive, now softened into a tranquil blue. The winds, which had whipped violently just hours before, now blew gently, carrying with them the sweet scent of rain that promised a fresh start. The elders, wise in their ways, sensed the Spirit's touch. They gathered in the center of the village, chanting words from the deepest corners of their knowledge. The drums beat rhythmically, summoning the spirits to bless the land once more. Amara stood at the heart of the village, her hands clasped before her in silent prayer. She felt the Spirit's presence, strong yet gentle, like a mother's embrace. As the elders performed their rituals, they called upon the spirits to cleanse the village of its doubt and fear. They prayed for unity, for healing, and for the restoration of balance in the land. The villagers, once divided by suspicion and betrayal, now felt the subtle pull of hope. Their hearts, heavy with uncertainty, began to lighten. The fear that had once clouded their minds began to dissipate like mist in the early morning sun. The people exchanged glances, some still hesitant, but many now nodding in quiet understanding. They saw the truth. Amara had given everything for them. She had shown courage in the face of unimaginable hardship, and now that truth would bind them all together. The village, once fractured, was now healing. The bonds between the people, once frayed, were being woven together again by the threads of trust and understanding. The elders, standing tall, now offered their blessings, and the people, feeling the strength of those blessings, embraced one another. The healing was not immediate, but it was profound, like the steady growth of a tree that, though it starts as a small seed, eventually reaches for the sky. The village was coming back to life. Chief Okafor stood alone, his back against the ancient tree where he had once gathered with the village's ancestors. His heart was heavy, burdened by grief, yet tempered by the understanding of the necessity of his daughter's sacrifice. She had chosen the hard path, the path of truth, even when it cost her everything she had ever known. Amara's decision had shattered the image he had built, the one he had worked so hard to protect. She was not his daughter by blood, and that truth had caused his leadership to falter, his community to question his worth. But now, with the Spirit's blessing, he understood. His love for Amara had never been about blood. It had always been about something deeper, something more sacred. He gazed out at the village where the sounds of healing filled the air. The children played, The elders gathered in quiet conversation, and the men and women worked together once more. It was peaceful, and in this peace, Okafor found solace. The loss of Amara, her departure, was like a wound in his heart, but he understood that her actions had brought balance. She had made the ultimate sacrifice for the greater good, and in doing so, she had saved them all. "She has given us the greatest gift," Okafor whispered to the wind. "The truth." He knew now that true greatness did not lie in hiding the truth. It lay in accepting it, even when it broke your heart. Amara walked quietly, her feet light upon the earth. She had chosen to leave, to seek the solace of the wilderness where the land could speak to her in silence. The village was healing, but she knew her place was no longer among them. Her journey, though one of sacrifice, was not over. She needed to find peace within herself, to understand the full weight of the truth she had revealed. As she moved through the forest, the birds above called to one another in sweet harmony. The trees whispered ancient secrets to her, as if welcoming her into their fold. She was not running away. She was stepping into a new chapter of her life, one where she could truly reflect on what had happened and what it had meant. Her footsteps, though quiet, felt strong. In her heart, she carried the lessons of her people and the love of the father who had raised her. She had not been born of the village, but she had become its daughter through her actions. She had shown the people what it meant to be true, and in that she had found the strength to walk alone. As the days passed, the village began to awaken. The people, once clouded by doubt, now understood the power of truth. They realized that Amara's story was not one of betrayal, but one of courage, sacrifice, and redemption. It had taken their hearts to the deepest places of fear and doubt, and brought them back to the light. The villagers gathered at the fire that night, telling the tale of Amara. The elders spoke of her bravery, her willingness to lay herself bare before the spirits, and the sacrifice she had made for the greater good. The children listened with wide eyes, understanding that greatness was not in perfection, but in truth. "She is not just a story," the elder woman said, her voice rich with the weight of years. "She is a lesson for all of us." The village, now united in purpose, vowed to honor Amara's memory by living with greater integrity. They would no longer chase after perfection, but would instead strive for honesty, for courage, and for love. The years passed, and Amara's legacy lived on. Her story was told time and time again, passed from generation to generation. It became a cornerstone of the village's values, a tale woven into the fabric of their lives. The lessons she had taught about courage, sacrifice, and the power of truth shaped the hearts of all who heard her name. And Chief Okafor, though still grieving, had become a wiser ruler. His leadership was no longer about power or control, but about balance. He had learned that a true leader must listen to the spirits, honor the past, and embrace the truth, no matter how painful it may be. As he sat with the elders by the fire, watching the children play in the distance, he smiled softly. "She has left us a legacy," he said, his voice steady, "and in that we are forever bound." The village, its heart healed, looked forward to a future shaped by the courage of one young woman who had dared to speak the truth, no matter the cost. The sun was setting behind the hills, casting long shadows over the village. A gentle wind stirred the trees, but within the heart of the community, the air was thick with tension. Amara stood at the center of it all, her heart heavy with the weight of truth, her breath shallow with the anticipation of what was to come. In the marketplace, whispers grew like a storm cloud, gathering strength as they spread. The truth of Amara's origins had been laid bare, and with it came the unraveling of everything she had known. Her once adoring villagers now looked at her with suspicion. The faces of those she had called friends now hardened into masks of distrust. Kofi, her childhood companion, was the first to speak. How could you hide such a thing from us, Amara? The chief's daughter. But you are not his blood. What is your place among us now?" Amara felt the sting of his words, sharp like a thorn in her side. Her voice, steady but burdened, cut through the silence. "I am still Amara. The truth does not change who I am at my core. It does not change the love I have for this village, the people who raised me. But it is the truth, and we must all live by it." Yet, the villagers could not hear her. Their hearts had already turned away from her, like trees stripped of their leaves in the dry season. It was not just her they betrayed. It was the very trust that had bound them all together. The secrets they had lived with now seemed like stones, heavy and unforgiving. Elder Adama, who had once called Amara a daughter, stepped forward. Her face, weathered by years of wisdom, was now clouded with sorrow. "You were a symbol of perfection, Amara," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "We believed in you, in the image you represented. But now, the veil is lifted, and we are left with nothing but our broken hearts." Amara closed her eyes, the pain of their words striking deeper than she could ever have imagined. She had never asked to be perfect. She had only wanted to be true. But in this village, truth had become a burden too heavy to bear. As she turned away, she could feel the eyes of the village on her, the weight of their judgment pressing down like 1,000 stones. The once welcoming faces were now distant, like shadows at dusk. The betrayal cut deep, not just because of the lies that had been told, but because of the painful realization that in a world where perfection was worshipped, truth often came with a price. It was a price Amara had been willing to pay. But the village? They were not ready for the cost of honesty. The next morning, the village was divided like never before. Some stood with Amara, insisting that her truth was her right to live by, while others, led by the elders, argued that tradition must stand above all else. She was meant to be the perfect daughter of the chief, Elder Adama declared, her voice shaking with the weight of her words. Now, her very existence shatters the balance we have fought so hard to maintain. But there were others who saw things differently. A young man named Chijioke, who had once admired Amara from afar, stood up. "The truth must be greater than tradition," he said, his voice steady. "We cannot cling to the past if it is built on lies. The village must grow, or we will wither like the dry trees." The argument raged, echoing through the village like a storm that would not pass. It was a battle between tradition and change, between the fear of the unknown and the wisdom that had guided the village for generations. The elders, though wise, were blind to the future, clinging to what had always been. But the younger ones, like Chijioke, saw that change was not a threat, it was life itself. Amara stood apart from them, her heart heavy. She had never asked to be the cause of such division. Yet here she was, the embodiment of both the old ways and the new. She had no answers, only the truth of who she was. In the days that followed, the village began to heal, though it was not without pain. Amara's true identity had torn apart the fabric of the community, but it also opened the door to something new. The villagers began to understand that perfection was a mirage, an illusion they had created to shield themselves from the complexities of life. As time passed, the village slowly began to heal, but the scars of betrayal remained. Yet, in those scars, the villagers found wisdom. They learned that the path to healing was not in perfection, but in embracing their flaws, their mistakes, and their humanity. Amara, too, began to learn. In her solitude, she faced the truth about herself, not the truth of her birth, but the truth of her heart. She had been shaped by her choices, by the love and sacrifice she had given to the village, and by the painful reality that truth, no matter how painful, was the key to growth. And so, as the village slowly began to rebuild, the people understood the lesson they had been taught. It was not perfection that mattered, but the willingness to accept who they truly were. It was through their mistakes, their flaws, and their willingness to embrace change that they could move forward. Amara's story, though one of pain and betrayal, became a tale of redemption and hope. The village would never be the same, but it would be stronger, more unified, because they had learned that truth, no matter how painful, had the power to heal. And in the end, the village became a place where the past and the future could walk, hand in hand, where the old ways could blend with the new, and where Amara's legacy would live on, a legacy not of perfection, but of truth, sacrifice, and the power of self-acceptance.